Donald Trump has finally cornered dictator Putin, and the Kremlin is forced to abandon its ally. Vladimir Putin recently issued a new round of threats to Ukraine and the West, as well as new criticism directed at the American president, and noted that relations between Russia and America are supposedly normalizing. And this became the key statement, but the main point remained unsaid. Later, Putin stated that Russia is preparing to reduce the country's defense budget, and Trump suddenly started talking about supplying additional weapons to Ukraine. But behind all this, there are more subtle events that took place in the Middle East. The Kremlin's lack of support for the Iranian regime indicates its fear of possible retaliatory measures from the United States, such as supplying weapons to Ukraine and more. Russia is avoiding involvement in the situation with Iran, and apart from condemning United States attacks and promising vague assistance to the Iranian people, the Russian dictator Putin has not announced any specific military supplies to Tehran. And this is despite the fact that, let me remind you, in January Moscow and Tehran signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement that includes military technical cooperation. At the same time, it is becoming increasingly clear that NATO is seriously preparing for a possible Russian invasion of Europe. This completely ruins the plans of the Russian dictator to pressure the European Union with this very threat. Well, and in a sense, Trump also contributed to this. And the reduction in war spending also points to the approaching collapse of the economy. Simply put, Putin can't handle a big war. My name is Alexei Pichi. Today is June 28th on the calendar. Let's take a look at this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, write any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, as you know, recently Putin made a new batch of outrageous statements. Well, for example, Putin predicted the imminent collapse of Western economies. Next, I'll quote Putin. What's happening in Western countries? They're always burying us, but they'll kick the bucket themselves soon enough. And according to Putin, last year, Russia's gross domestic product grew by 4.3%, while in the Eurozone it was less than 1%. And in the leading European economies, particularly in Germany, quote, everything is balancing on the edge of recession. But it's true. At the same time, the president of the Russian Federation noted that this year, the growth of the Russian economy will be much more modest. But it's obvious that all these statements about the West dying soon are meant exclusively for the Russian herd. Like, things are bad here, of course, but they're even worse over there. And because of such statements, another piece of news gets lost. Because Putin announced plans to cut military spending after officials warned that Russia is on the verge of that very recession. According to Putin, the Russian Federation will cut defense spending next year or over the next 3 years. His comments came after Russia's Minister of Economic Development, Maxim Reshetnikov, said last week that Russia is on the verge of a recession. The head of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation, Elvira Nabiullina, also warned that the country's wartime economic growth, driven by massive spending in the state defense sector, is gradually fading. And here, I'll quote an important statement from Nabiullina herself. We grew at a fairly rapid pace for 2 years because free resources were activated. We have to understand that many of these resources are indeed exhausted. This includes the welfare fund, which Putin had been filling for years, and now it's almost empty. And these are not just my fantasies. These are the words of Nabiullina, which she voiced last week. It turns out that this welfare fund is already empty and they can't take any more money from it. For 2 years, they managed to pull assets from there and keep the economy afloat that way. But now this fund is completely empty. So, let me remind you that last week Putin mocked these statements by Nabiullina and said, "Why are you spreading panic? What's wrong with you?" The economy is doing great, but then just a few days later he admits it himself. But all of this is just the background. Because besides the economic decline, which even Putin himself now admits, there are also purely geopolitical indicators that Putin has been set up for a very deep stretch. And here we move on to the Middle East. The inability of the Russian Federation to provide tangible support to Iran may lead to it finally losing its supposedly valuable ally. Moscow likes to showcase its friendship with this ally as a scare tactic whenever it wants to threaten the West. Now, there is no longer any scarecrow in the form of a grand alliance of dictatorial forces. But, as they say, there is another side of the coin. And do you remember how Trump said that Putin offered him his help with Iran, and he replied, quote, "Vladimir, you can help me with Russia, not with Iran?" So, if Putin decided to help Tehran rearm, perhaps by providing new air defense systems, this would most likely anger United States President Donald Trump, who in response might decide to increase arms supplies to Ukraine. And here, the first signs of such a decision are already present, even though Putin still hasn't helped Iran. Today, Trump commented on the possibility of sending missiles for Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine. While speaking with journalists, Trump was asked whether he is considering the possibility of sending these missiles to the Ukrainian army. And when asked if he had already made a decision, Trump gave a brief and ambiguous answer saying, maybe. But in the White House, more and more people are leaning toward the idea that air defense systems should be given to Ukraine and that it needs to be done. Moreover, this would fully fit even within the Make America Great Again ideology. After all, Ukraine is ready to buy both the missiles and the Patriot systems themselves, and Europe is ready to pay for such purchases. And the money for all this is already available, so this is no longer gratuitous aid, but purely market relations. Yes, it's worth mentioning that Trump today praised the Kremlin ruler Putin for some very pleasant statements he made. He said that he respects the politician and considers his peace efforts sincere. Quote, "Putin respects our country. Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un also respect our country. Last year they didn't respect us." But, I wouldn't pay much attention to such statements from Trump because before that, Putin practically flattered Trump. Putin praised Donald Trump's wisdom, boasted that the United States and Russia had become closer, and then added that he would be happy to meet with Donald Trump. Next is a quote from Putin. "I'm always open to contacts, to meetings. I know that Mr. Trump has also spoken about the possibility of a meeting. I, just like him, believe that such meetings need to be prepared. And as a result, we should reach new levels of cooperation. Overall, a meeting is quite possible, and we will be happy to prepare for it." But Trump's attitude could quickly roll back again. And that's why Putin is once again signaling to Trump that he is ready to meet with him. Trump sees this as an adequate position in the search for peace in Ukraine. Let me repeat once again, Trump said today that he believes in the sincerity of Putin's peace efforts. And now, let me remind you that 2 days ago, the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, said that he spoke with Trump at the NATO summit in The Hague. And he told him that he would join the peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, provided that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin agrees to take part in them. Here is a quote from Erdogan. "Trump told me, if the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, comes to Istanbul or Ankara to resolve the issue, then I will also come. We will establish the necessary contacts, and God willing, this meeting will take place as soon as possible." Do you think Putin will come to negotiations with Zelensky and Trump in Turkey? No, of course not. He already showed this in May. He showed that he can only boast, make some statements, but in reality, he won't go anywhere. Sorry, but Putin is just too afraid to stick his head out of his bunker at all. And now the most important question, how will Donald Trump react to this? Because it's more than obvious now that Putin is leading him on, saying he's ready to meet and talk, and then this bald jerk just backs out and hides behind some excuses. But let's get back to Iran. Russia has a strategic partnership with Iran, and very fragile yet significant relations have begun to develop with the American administration. It's obvious that Trump's team is still trying to establish relations with the Kremlin, whether we like it or not. On the other hand, Putin has working relations with the leadership of Israel. And making a choice clearly wasn't part of the Kremlin's plans. And here, the Kremlin, messed up. It's important to understand that Putin maintained a careful balance between Iran and Israel for a long time, keeping an open partnership with the Ayatollahs and a covert alliance with Israel. He sees both of these directions as strategically valuable for Russia's geopolitical influence in the Middle East. Putin expresses hypocritical support for Tehran through diplomatic, song, dance, and performance. The day after the United States strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, Meeting with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in the Kremlin, Putin promised support to the Iranian people. However, as you know, he didn't authorize not only arms supplies, he didn't authorize anything except words. This decision by Putin not to provide direct assistance to Iran is especially important in light of the fact that Iran sent Russia significant shipments of weapons for its war against Ukraine. They include short-range ballistic missile systems, the FAT-360 missile system, and of course those very same kamikaze drones, Shahed-136 and Shahed-131. Iran's assistance allowed Russia to reserve more advanced missiles with greater range for other purposes, which enabled Moscow to use its arsenal against Ukraine more effectively. The lack of reciprocity from Moscow suggests that Putin is seriously concerned about the possibility of increased support for Ukraine from the United States. It also indicates that Trump is secretly stacking the deck to play against Putin when the time comes. And now it should be acknowledged that Trump has clearly shown that there is no Putin influence in the Middle East whatsoever. The Kremlin can boast and keep claiming that it supposedly has some influence in the Middle East, that it's some kind of player there, but in reality, it's already a nobody there. Absolutely. The war between Israel and Iran has clearly shown this. Putin is a nobody in the Middle East. Russia has absolutely no influence there. Even China now has more influence there than the Russians. So, to sum up, we can say that the West has chosen, unfortunately, a rather long but still effective way to strangle Russia. And only now are we seeing that the Kremlin's margin of safety has finally started to collapse. The economy is cracking, but its geopolitical influence is relentlessly declining. So I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video or by using the QR code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.